I don't know. I still think that this album should have been called Djent is Not a Genre. I think they kind of missed the mark or missed a great opportunity. And when I see an opening, I'm going to take it. And for a band that's usually so good with not missing the mark, I'm surprised they let that one slip. So anyway, let's get into the actual album. Periphery 5, Djent is Not a Genre by Periphery. So if you can believe it, Djent is Not a Genre is the 7th studio album. If you consider the Juggernaut Alpha and Omega to be 2 releases, it's a 6th album if you consider them to be 1. And if you're not familiar with Periphery, Periphery got their start in the mid-2000s and really pioneered the Djent style, which is funny because as pioneers, they're the ones, and it's been a meme online where it's like, well, Djent isn't a genre of music, it's a style of music, it's an expression. So they hooked their horse to that buggy and said, yeah, we're gonna play with the meme a little bit. And I have to admit, I'm a little late to the Periphery party. It wasn't until Periphery 4 Hail Stand that I got really, really excited for. Juggernaut and Omega, I remember when it first came out in 2005, and Periphery 3 I heard was pretty good. But Periphery, Periphery 2, Periphery 3, I didn't really connect with that, and I really haven't spent too much time with it. So my really only exposure to the band has been Periphery 4 and now Periphery 5. And I really enjoyed Periphery 4. I think you can find my review for it up here. Really loved Reptile, and the rest of the songs were okay after that. The thing that I think makes Periphery stand out from the Djent style of music from a lot of their different contemporaries is that they're not just focused in on creating technical riffs or technical rhythms to overlay all this like tech progressive metal aspect on it. They have just as much focus of creating melodies, of creating harmonizations, of creating very enjoyable music. You know, it's not all about the 7/8 time signatures that they're going for. It's not about the polyrhythms that they're creating with the multiple guitars. They actually do spend quite a bit of time focusing in and creating catchy choruses. They create really interesting and lovely licks on the guitars. So I was pretty excited when I heard that Periphery was coming out with a new album, and I was also getting really excited because they were taking their time with this one. You know, for a band that at their early outset, you know, were pumping out albums pretty quickly. This one, they decided to write a track, leave it alone, sit on it for a little bit, revisit it, just to make sure that it was still where they wanted it to be. And that persnicketiness, that attention to detail can definitely be felt within this album proper. I love so many different moments on this album. This, for me, is my favorite outfit from Periphery up to this point. I think they've really developed and matured as a band. They've tightened up quite a bit, but they've still left quite a bit of room to play around in. And you can feel that right from the beginning with Wildfire, which opens up with one hell of a bit like a punch to the face. And what I love is that the lead singer is able to command his voice both in the growls and the screaming. You know, Spencer is so good at that bombastic, that very harsh style of metal screamings and vocals, but he's also really good at commanding a little bit more on the softer and mellow side as well. And that's what I really do love about Wildfire, is that even though it's 7 minutes, it does play a lot within that space, and it does move itself and shift and change its focus, which allows for Atropos, the second track, to also kind of do that. And what I love about Atropos is, much like Wildfire, it starts off heavy, it starts off intense, it grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go, but it also has a lot of different nooks and crannies to play around in, you know, and I love some of the build-ups. The drumming styles, I really, really do have to applaud Matt Halpern on the drums for just being able to kind of wrangle these guys and like really solidify what's being dropped down there. His blast beats are really to be applauded, and I cannot help but just like Ugh. And I haven't even mentioned Misha Mansour or Bulb on guitars, programming, synthesizers, orchestration. Like, it's definitely more of his brainchild in that sense, but loving what he's being able to capture and really solidify. One of my favorite tracks off of this is the third track of Wax Wings. And one of the things that I do love is kind of the throwbacks that we have in terms of programming on this. I'm loving how tracks on here have like little interludes between tracks. It's reminding me of when I used to get a CD in middle school and you would have these spaces, these like countdowns on the actual disc runtime between tracks. And Wax Wings has this as well. And I cannot wait to listen to this track being played live. The buildups that we have, the vocal soarings that we have on here, the soaring guitars, they're not just that technical insanity. They do infuse, even though it's not my favorite style of music, the kind of emo style of music where we've got a little bit more of that emotive, very expressive styles of music that is very interesting in this case, and I do feel as though it works really, really fine. Speaking of Everything Is Fine, the fourth track, Everything Is Fine, is probably the most brutal track off of this, and I love how it's playing with this like deniability of, that meme where it's the dog in a burning house being like, this is fine, everything is fine, when it's so very clearly not. And I love that dichotomy, that cognitive dissonance, and the music really shows that frustration, and it just beats you over the head. It's like, this is not fine. And the vocal works are soaring when he's screaming. The fifth track, this track of Silhouette, not a big fan of, and it kind of sits out like a sore thumb for me. It feels like a Owl City or a Coldplay track, and it just feels very out of place. And I do enjoy parts of this track, and I feel as though if they had split this track up and like put it into other tracks, we probably could have had something a little bit better. But as it is, I just feel myself not as excited about it, which then leads into Dying Star, again, not being as enjoyable. Like, it's catchy, and I really do enjoy the final play out of Dying Star, but I just feel as though it's a little too on the emo side for me. I'm getting flavors too much of like Coheed and Cambria that I'm not a big fan of some of their works in that kind of a setting. Now, I know a lot of people love that seventh track of Zaguris, and I get it. It's kind of like the poster child for a Periphery track. It's heavy, it's hard hitting, it's got that Gent licks that we all like, it's got the ebb and flows. There's a lot of different stylings and movements on here. I love the kind of midsection where it kind of dips down, then builds back up again. But I feel like because it is kind of grazing past the 8-minute mark, I just wish that there was a little bit more space. Now, that can't be said about the last two tracks of Dracul Grass and Thanks Nobu. These two tracks are my favorite outside of Wax Wings on this album, and it's got the space that we love from this band. It's got that orchestration on here, like the orchestration, the penmanship of the music. There's a lot more forethought on these two tracks, and I love that the band is able to really stretch their legs and really like allow the audience to dig their teeth into this. And this provides probably my favorite run of music from Periphery. Even though Reptile's still my favorite track from them, I still feel like Dracul Grass and Thanks Nobu have my favorite run of music on there. In my opinion, I think that this is their best work to date. I think it is their most mature album. It shows how far they've grown as musicians, and they really want to put that on display. It also shows that they're able to change and grow past certain techniques that they've been leaning on for a little too long, Like Djent at this point it's not the up and coming kid that it once was, back in the early 2010s. It's been around for a while, so I really am excited to see what a lot of these more djenty bands are going to do now that they've kind of mastered the craft. Like, where are they going to go from here? And I really do love what Periphery is now doing with this. And they kind of rightly state that, Djent isn't a genre. It is, in fact, a style, and that a band can move and grow beyond it, or they can morph and change it and play around with some of the structures and some of the principles to still maintain what made it so interesting and fresh at the beginning and continue that. And I think that they did a really good job here. I have to applaud them for it. In the end, I will say Periphery 5, Djent is not a genre, from Periphery, is one I would absolutely pick up in physical format. As I mentioned, this is probably their strongest album. There's, a little bit of a dip in the middle with Silhouette and Dying Star. But once you kind of get past that, the rest of the album really is a full-on banger. I highly recommend this one. Go and check it out. This is a great entry point for Periphery. If you're a fan of the more extreme, heavy, harsh metal, the technical, the death metals, I think you're going to really enjoy this one. And if you haven't heard Periphery by now, go and check it out. I think you might get something good out of it. That's all I've got for you guys today. That's all I got. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I've got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.